The night of January 16, 1984 seemed like any other for the Bennett family in Aurora, Colorado. They had just celebrated their daughter Melissa's upcoming 8th birthday with family and friends. The house was full of laughter and warmth. As the evening ended, Bruce and Deborah Bennett put their daughters, Melissa and 3-year-old Vanessa, to bed, not knowing that their peaceful home was about to be shattered by a terrible act of violence. Bruce and Deborah Bennett married in the 1970s, brimming with hopes and dreams for their future together. Nearing their 20s, the young couple looked forward to building a life side by side. Bruce, born on April 22, 1956 in Denver, Colorado, had an unremarkable childhood as suggested by later accounts, with 2 brothers named Richard and Daniel. Deborah was the eldest of 4 siblings, children of war veteran Ernest Large and his wife, Rosina Martinez. Tragically, Deborah lost her mother at a young age, forcing her to take on the responsibility of caring for her younger siblings alongside her father. The family eventually relocated to Colorado, where Larry, one of Deborah's brothers, met Bruce, leading to a friendship that ultimately brought Bruce and Deborah together. The pair soon fell in love and decided to start a family. To support his new family, Bruce enlisted in the Navy, serving as a sonar analyst stationed at Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. This job allowed him to work with advanced technology, providing a stable income. During his service, their first daughter, Melissa Bennett, was born in January 1976. Their second daughter, Vanessa, arrived in 1981. After completing his military service, Bruce had succeeded in securing a better financial standing for his family. They settled in Aurora, Colorado, and in 1983, they used their savings and a loan to purchase their first home. Bruce and Deborah joined the family's furniture distribution business, while Bruce also pursued studies to become an air traffic controller. The Bennett family led a quiet life, enjoying their time with their 2 young daughters. However, their peaceful existence was shattered in early 1984. On Sunday, January 15, 1984, the Bennetts hosted a family gathering to celebrate Melissa's upcoming 8th birthday. Deborah had planned a party at school for her daughter, but the family also gathered at the Bennett home for a pre-birthday celebration. The day was filled with laughter, conversation, and a delicious cake. As the evening wound down, Melissa's grandparents and uncles left for their homes. One of the uncles noticed the garage door was open and reminded Bruce to close it, unaware it would be the last time he would see Bruce alive. The next morning, on January 16, 1984, Bruce's mother, Constance Bennett, known as Connie, received a call from the family furniture store. Bruce and Deborah had not shown up for work, and no one was answering the phone at their house. Concerned, Connie decided to check on them. When she arrived at the Bennett home, the garage door was still open. Entering the house, she was met with a horrifying sight. Bruce lay at the foot of the stairs in a pool of blood with severe head trauma and a deep cut across his throat. Shocked and terrified, Connie ran to a neighbor for help. They called 911 and soon, police and medical personnel were on the scene. Inside the house, police discovered Deborah's body in the master bedroom, her head brutally beaten. In the children's room, they found Melissa, also beaten and stabbed, her face covered with a blanket and showing signs of sexual assault. Miraculously, little Vanessa, despite her severe injuries, was still alive. Emergency responders rushed her to the hospital, where her life hung by a thread. With Vanessa on the way to the hospital and the bodies of her family members removed, investigators began meticulously examining the Bennett home for clues. They found Deborah's purse outside in the snow, rifled through, likely by the attackers. Nearby, a butcher knife belonging to the Bennetts was discovered, believed to be one of the weapons used in the attacks. While the murder weapon used for the fatal blows was never found, investigators suspected it might have been a hammer, based on the injuries and a blood-stained outline found on a carpet. They collected fingerprints and other samples from various surfaces, hoping to find traces that would lead them to the perpetrator. They also noted blood-stained boot prints that the family did not recognize. Family members and close friends who had attended Melissa's birthday party that Sunday were also asked to provide DNA samples. Authorities took these measures, hoping that in the future they could be used for genetic studies, which were in their early stages at that time. Specialists carefully preserved the victim's clothing and, upon thorough examination, collected parts of the carpet beneath Melissa's body, as well as a bedspread and other items. Meanwhile, a team of healthcare professionals fought to keep Vanessa alive. The 3-year-old needed 3 units of blood and several units of fluids for the treatment of her numerous injuries. The doctor's report to the family was devastating. Vanessa had a shattered jaw, severe head injuries and broken arms, hips, and legs. She had also been sexually assaulted. As days passed, investigators realized that the Bennett family attack was not an isolated incident. Less than 2 weeks before the brutal assault on the Bennetts, several similar attacks had occurred in Colorado. One notable case involved the young couple James and Kimberly, who lived in the Aurora area. On the night of January 4, 1984, James and Kimberly were spending a quiet evening at home. Kimberly was in the bedroom, and James was recording music tapes for a friend. Suddenly, Kimberly was struck on the head in the dark. She managed to see the silhouette of a man who fled when she began to scream for her husband. James ran to the bedroom and was hit on the head by the hammer-wielding attacker. Despite his injury, James chased the assailant, who ultimately escaped. Kimberly, despite her severe head injury, called 911. Emergency services arrived and transported the couple to the nearest hospital. James had a skull fracture and Kimberly had a concussion, but both recovered. The police found the hammer used in the attack. They concluded that the assailant had entered through the garage, whose door was open. Fresh footprints in the snow led away from the house but eventually mixed with other tracks, and the trail was lost. They also found Kimberly's purse in the snow, missing only the money. Less than a week later, another violent incident shocked the Colorado community. Patricia Smith, a 50-year-old woman, had recently moved to Colorado from Nebraska to help her newly divorced daughter settle into a new home with her 2 young children. Patricia was a well-known interior decorator with a prestigious client list, known for her kindness, elegance, and activity. On Tuesday, January 10th, Patricia started her day by taking her daughter to a park to catch the bus to work, and then dropped off her grandchildren at daycare. She spent the rest of the morning working, picked up laundry at noon, and bought a hamburger for lunch. Arriving home, she went to her room, turned on the TV, and then apparently returned downstairs. Near the front door, she encountered an intruder in the living room. She had no time to react before a flurry of blows ended her life. That evening, around 5:30, her daughter was waiting at the park for her mother to pick her up. When Patricia did not arrive as usual, she called home from a public phone, but no one answered. Concerned, she called a cousin who picked her up along with the children and took them home. Upon arrival, they noticed the garage door open, and inside the darkened house, a flickering light from the TV upstairs. She found her mother's body on the floor, covered with a child's blanket with obvious signs of bleeding. Patricia's pants and boots were scattered around and her upper clothing was open, indicating another brutal assault. Beside her lay a hammer. Unable to believe what she was seeing, the terrified daughter ran to a neighbor's house, asking for help to confirm if her mother was still alive. Unfortunately, she was not. They immediately called 911. After Patricia's body was taken to the morgue for examination, the autopsy revealed 17 head injuries and confirmed sexual assault. Investigators deduced that after killing Patricia, the attacker went upstairs, stole money from her purse, and then fled. The investigation extended to Patricia's close acquaintances, including clients with whom she had had disagreements, but no leads emerged. That same day, January 10th, another young woman was attacked. Her name was Donna. She was a flight attendant for Frontier Airlines and her partner, Ron, was a pilot. That evening, Donna was off duty and awaiting Ron's return from a night flight. After shopping for groceries, she collected the mail and parked her car in the garage. As she exited her vehicle, she was struck on the temple and lost consciousness. The following morning, Ron returned home to find a red trail from the garage to the house. He rushed inside and followed the trail to the bedroom, where he found Donna lying on the bed with a head wound. Somehow, Donna had managed to make it to the bedroom. Ron called 911 immediately. Paramedics arrived and rushed Donna to the hospital, where she received treatment. Doctors confirmed she had been sexually assaulted. Initially, Ron was considered a suspect, but he had just landed in Colorado, and Donna's attack had occurred hours earlier. Investigators found a hammer covered in blood in the driver's seat of Donna's car. They collected it as evidence but found no useful fingerprints. Despite her severe injuries, Donna recovered, though the head injury left her with significant short-term memory loss, unable to recall the night of the attack. This lack of memory was, in some ways, a blessing to Donna, who was grateful to have survived. 6 days later, less than 25 miles from Donna and Ron's home, the horrific attack on the Bennett family occurred. Throughout that tragic January, while the families of the deceased mourned their losses, those who survived, like little Vanessa, continued their recovery. The Bennett family, especially Vanessa's grandmother Connie, held out hope for the child's recovery. The investigation stretched on. Investigators collected all possible evidence from the 4 crime scenes, including genetic material, footprints, and other clues. However, in the 1980s, forensic technology was far less advanced than today, and DNA analysis was just beginning. The attacks occurred in both Aurora and Lakewood, leading local police to share information. Unfortunately, no useful fingerprints were found at the crime scenes or on the hammers used in the attacks. The FBI was brought in, and a profiler studied the case, concluding that the attacker was likely an opportunistic rather than a predator. He did not target specific victims but seemed to roam neighborhoods looking for easy access, such as open garage doors. Once inside, his attacks were swift, violent, and fatal, followed by sexual assault and theft of money only. The profiler estimated that the perpetrator was a young man around 20 years old, intelligent but not highly educated, possibly a high school graduate but not a college student. The repeated use of hammers and a rugged boot print found at one scene suggested he worked in construction. At the time, numerous homes were being built in the areas where the crimes occurred. Most worryingly, The profiler asserted that this man would continue attacking until he was caught. Using this profile, investigators visited construction sites, talking to contractors and seeking information about any unusual behavior among workers. However, contractor records were not thorough and no useful descriptions of the attacker were available since all assaults were sudden and occurred in darkness. While the investigation continued without new leads, the community was gripped by fear. Residents became vigilant about locking their garages and doors, with some buying guns or even wearing helmets to bed. Time passed without further attacks, and the police were forced to move on to new cases, leaving these brutal crimes unresolved. Survivors of the assaults were recovering and trying to move past the trauma of their harrowing experiences, while the families of the victims continued to grapple with the pain of their loss. Periodically, the original investigators of the attacks, along with those who replaced them, would contact specialized departments and laboratories, hoping that advances in DNA technology might finally identify the perpetrator. In 1990, Aurora police sent samples from a bedspread, a carpet, and other items collected from the Bennett crime scene to a forensic examiner in Richmond, California. Unfortunately, no significant progress was made at the time. During a new review of the evidence, investigators found a blonde pubic hair and sent it for specialized analysis. However, due to the primitive technology of the time, the test destroyed this single hair without yielding any results. It wasn't until 2001, 17 years after the attacks, that full identification of the DNA samples was achieved, ruling out family members as potential suspects. It took another 3 years to definitively link the family case with Patricia's case, as the same DNA was found in samples from both crime scenes. Yet, the DNA belonged to an unknown individual, and finding a match in existing databases was challenging. Genetic databases across the U.S. were still in their infancy, with each state and agency having its own rules. In 2018, in another attempt to solve the cases, detectives teamed up with a genealogist. She used the sequenced DNA and began searching public and private databases. Within a week, she informed the detectives that the DNA belonged to someone with the last name Ewing. This was a significant breakthrough. Police found 3 or 4 in Colorado with the last name Ewing, but they were all ruled out as suspects. Further searches in Aurora's databases revealed 40 individuals with the surname Ewing. Investigators began analyzing each one while handling other cases. Finally, in July 2018, they discovered a match with an inmate in Nevada. The man, Alex Ewing. He was born on August 14, 1960, in North Carolina. Little is known about his childhood, and he never spoke about it, but it is known that he dropped out of school after the 10th grade. He claimed he was expelled for frequently getting drunk. This was the beginning of a life of crime. Alex was detained for months in a juvenile center in Sacramento, California, for theft. He was later sent to a foster home, where he stayed for 2 weeks before being released. He then embarked on a criminal career, being arrested multiple times in California, Arizona, and Florida for theft, burglary, and escape. According to a driver's license he obtained in 1983, Alex was living in Denver, Colorado. The attacks occurred in early 1984, leaving injured and 4 dead over 12 days. The assault stopped when Alex left Colorado, moving to Kingman, Arizona a few days later. There, on January 27, 1984, he broke into a home and attacked Roy Williams with a granite rock, hitting him in the head and chest. Roy survived, requiring 100 stitches. He gave a partial description of his attacker. Later that day, a police officer spotted a man matching the description hiding in bushes near an interstate on-ramp. The officer approached, and Alex fled. After a chase, Alex was apprehended. On February 2, 1984, Alex was formally charged with attempted first-degree murder and first-degree robbery and held in jail in Utah. In early August 1984, Alex and several inmates were transported from jail for a court hearing. During a stop at a service station, he escaped. Wearing red shorts and an orange jumpsuit, he ran and disappeared. At 10 p.m., police received calls about a suspicious man in red shorts running through a neighborhood. An hour later, Nancy Berry called 911 in a panic, saying she and her husband had been attacked. Nancy and her husband Chris were found severely injured in their bed. Alex had broken in through their open garage door and attacked them with an axe handle. Fortunately, their children were unharmed. A massive manhunt ensued, but Alex remained elusive. 4 days later, he was spotted at a phone booth, apparently calling his brother for help. He tried to flee, but weakened and dehydrated, was captured. Back in custody, Alex faced trial and was charged with attempted murder, assault with a deadly weapon, robbery, and escape. He was sentenced to 110 years in prison. Meanwhile, he had been at large for less than 8 months after the Colorado attacks. In July 2018, a team of Colorado police and prosecutors traveled to the Northern Nevada Correctional Center to interview Alex. Initially posing as non-law enforcement, they did not mention the Colorado crimes. However, with the breakthrough in DNA technology and genealogy research, they finally had the evidence needed to connect Alex Ewing to the heinous crimes that had haunted Colorado for over 3 decades. In this conversation, Alex recounted that his father was in the Air Force and discussed his abandonment of school, claiming he had suffered from spinal meningitis, which led to a near-death experience and a change in his behavior. He also mentioned that before arriving in Nevada, he had spent an unspecified time in Colorado, working in construction in Aurora and Lakewood. He said he left because it was too cold. This information confirmed Alex's presence in Colorado. The next day, a detective returned to meet with him, showing 6 black and white photographs of the crimes in that state. Initially, Alex denied knowing any of the victims. However, when shown a color photo of Patricia alive, he still claimed not to know her. But upon seeing a color image of her body, he became visibly agitated, insisted there must be a mistake, and immediately requested a lawyer. Alex had not anticipated this turn of events. After 34 years in prison, he was preparing documents to request parole, which he could do after serving 40 years. Confident in his release, he even created a profile on a dating site. Following this meeting, Colorado detectives obtained a court order to collect an additional cheek swab from Alex. The DNA results confirmed a match with samples from the Bennett and Patricia crime scenes. With this confirmation, police began notifying the families and survivors of the 1984 attacks, informing them they had finally found the perpetrator. However, justice would still take time. The first step was to request Alex's extradition from Nevada to Colorado for trial. The first extradition hearing took place on October 2, 2018. Alex informed the judge he planned to fight the extradition, and over the next 16 months, his lawyer filed appeals at every possible level. Meanwhile, Colorado prosecutors were considering their options. Unfortunately, for cases without fatalities, prosecution was impossible due to a 3-year statute of limitations. However, Alex could be tried for the fatal attacks, which meant he would be prosecuted for the deaths of the 3 Bennett family members and Patricia under Colorado's 1984 laws. At the time of the crimes, the maximum penalty was life without parole, as the death penalty was not applicable. On February 21, 2020, the Nevada Supreme Court ordered Alex's transfer to Colorado to face charges. His lawyer made an emergency appeal to the U.S. Supreme Court, but it was declined. On February 28, 2020, Alex was flown to Colorado, and 2 days later he appeared in court for his first hearing. The trial for the Bennett family case began on July 27, 2021. The prosecution's case centered on Alex's confirmed DNA presence in semen traces found near Melissa's body. They highlighted the similarities in modus operandi, comparing it to the fatal attack on Patricia. Both cases involved brutal hammer attacks, sexual assault, and the bodies being left partially naked with faces covered. The attacker had entered through open garages, and the women's purses were found ransacked nearby. The defense attempted to undermine the investigators' professionalism, claiming mishandling of DNA samples and noting the absence of fingerprints or touch DNA at the crime scenes. The prosecution countered that Alex could have worn gloves. The jury heard from police, firefighters, investigators, and specialists. The most impactful testimony came from Connie Bennett, Bruce's mother, who described finding the horrific crime scene at her son's home. The jury also saw photographs taken at the Bennett residence. After deliberating for only 3.5 hours, the jury sent a note to the judge, stating they were deadlocked. The prosecutor requested the judge instruct the jury to continue deliberations, while the defense sought a mistrial. The judge decided it was too soon for a mistrial and asked the jury to return the next day. After 6 more hours of discussion, the jury found Alex Ewing guilty of the charges, including 3 counts of murder, robbery, and other offenses. On August 2021, before sentencing, family members, including Connie and Vanessa, the only survivor, gave impact statements. When asked if he had anything to say, Alex simply replied, "No, thank you." The judge harshly criticized Alex, stating that in all his years in the justice system, he had never encountered such depravity. He ensured Alex would never be free again, sentencing him to 3 consecutive life sentences, preventing the possibility of parole after 20 years. In October 2021, the trial for Patricia Smith's case began, but was declared a mistrial after Alex's defense requested a competency hearing to evaluate his mental state. The competency evaluation concluded that Alex was indeed mentally fit to stand trial. After delays, the trial finally took place in early April 2022. Unlike the first trial, Alex spoke up, complaining about his extradition from Nevada, accusing the system of being rigged, and alleging that authorities had ignored his efforts to lead them to the real criminals. Despite his arguments, the result was another life sentence, adding to the 3 he already had. Unfortunately, nothing could change the past. During the trial, Vanessa, the only survivor of the Bennett family, was present. Many might wonder what became of her after the tragedy. Vanessa shared her story in interviews with several media outlets describing a difficult life. Vanessa recounted that the brutal attack left her with severe physical and mental scars. After waking from a coma weeks after the assault, she had to relearn how to walk and do everything again. She mentioned having permanent physical injuries, including partial paralysis on her left side, making it hard for her to grip or release objects. However, the mental scars were even more profound. After being discharged from the hospital, Vanessa spent 2 months in a center for abused children before moving in with her grandmother. Filled with rage, she struggled at school where children mocked her, exacerbating her anger. She became rebellious, and her grandmother eventually enrolled her in a boarding school. During her first summer back home, she attempted suicide. Fortunately, the family intervened in time, and after recovery, she was sent to a psychiatric ward and then to a group home until she turned 18. At 18, Vanessa became pregnant, and social services took her child, as she admitted she did not know how to be a mother. Later, she had two more daughters who were placed in the care of a cousin, and she was not allowed to see or know their whereabouts. Vanessa developed borderline personality disorder, PTSD, bipolar disorder, and ADHD. Her fragmented memories of her family and life before the attack, coupled with severe mental instability and a drug addiction that began at 19, took a toll on her psyche. Vanessa explained that she used drugs to escape the world and forget everything, but this path led her to jail multiple times for shoplifting, assault, domestic violence, burglary, and drug possession. She lived homeless for a long time, residing under a bridge with a partner. This was her situation when she learned that her attacker had been caught. Despite the hardships, Vanessa found a ray of hope. By the age of 30, she decided to stop being a victim and dedicated herself to staying clean. She lived in an apartment with her second husband and had a cat. Vanessa aspired to obtain a university degree to become a counselor and help those struggling with substance abuse. When asked if she felt relieved when Alex was finally identified and punished, Vanessa said no. She expressed that while catching the killer might make others feel better, it meant nothing to her. The damage had already been done. Her life was ruined. Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations. Jamie McMahon and Christopher Kaufman were once considered quiet, likable young men by those who knew them well. Everyone thought they were just good guys. But out of the blue, they shocked their friends and family by unleashing a spree of kidnappings and murders that shook the small rural town of Gibson in Iowa. So, what led to such a drastic change in their behavior? Those who knew them say the answer lies in methamphetamines. Meth, a highly addictive stimulant that affects the central nervous system, became easily accessible in the population around 1997. Originally developed in the early 20th century from amphetamine, it was used in nasal decongestants and bronchial inhalers. This drug causes hyperactivity, non-stop talking, and a false sense of happiness and euphoria. In their crime spree, McMahon and Kaufman brutally murdered two women in what seemed like an execution-style killing. They also attempted to rob a bank, kidnapped two girls, and then vanished, leading the FBI on a lengthy manhunt across 6 states. This case has gone down in history as one of the most horrible in the United States. Jamie Gerald McMahon and Chris Michael Kaufman were born in small towns in Mahaska County, Iowa. McMahon's mother and Kaufman's father got together in 1979 and eventually married. The boys grew up together in Oskaloosa, Iowa, a city of then about 10,000 people. In 1997, Jamie was 22 and Chris was 18. McMahon was the outgoing, charismatic, and attractive older brother, while Kaufman was a quiet, non-athletic man. Kaufman had just graduated from high school with apparently few prospects and a group of friends who ran the streets, and McMahon had recently lost his job at a local plant. By the start of the summer, the 22-year-old McMahon was hanging out with 18-year-old Kaufman and his high school-age friends, and both were doing drugs. Friends and family described them as good kids who suddenly started to change. A few months before June 1997, Jamie began showing signs of personality changes. Soon after, he started spending a lot of time with his stepbrother Chris. This was surprising because, although they lived close by, they weren't part of the same social circle and hadn't been in close contact before. Suddenly, they were inseparable. It's unclear exactly when, but both began using methamphetamine, which their friends and family believe led them to commit horrific crimes. In the days leading up to their crime spree, the stepbrothers had been using meth and went almost a week without sleeping or eating. In fact, the night before the crimes, they partied with several girls at a hotel. That led up to Wednesday, June 11, 1997, when they embarked on a 4.5-hour-long rampage across south-central Iowa. Their first crime took place at a rural farm in What Cheer, Iowa, where 52-year-old Barbara Garber lived alone. Chris, apparently goaded by his brother, shot her directly in the forehead without hesitation or remorse. Barbara was then shot 3 more times at close range while seated in an armchair. She didn't resist, and there were no signs of forced entry. Afterward, Jamie and Chris fled in Garber's new vehicle, a dark green 1997 Dodge Dakota pickup truck, a model Jamie had always wanted but could never afford. Barbara was later found dead in her living room by her boss, who was concerned about her unusual absence from work. She was fully dressed, reclining on her left side as blood poured from her head wounds. Next to her feet lay her breakfast and a coffee cup. Neighbors were interviewed by investigators after Barbara's body was discovered. One neighbor reported seeing an unfamiliar blue car in Barbara's driveway early that morning as she left for work, but she didn't see anyone inside or take note of the license plate. The second murder and theft by the stepbrothers took place in rural Gibson. They went to the home of 18-year-old Eileen Schultz and shot her twice in the head at close range. This time, it was Jamie who pulled the trigger, ending the life of the young woman. Her mother had died in 1985 when Eileen was just 6 years old. Raised by her grandparents in the rural town of Gibson, Eileen had just graduated from high school a month before her murder. She worked part-time as a babysitter and a grocery store clerk. On the morning of the crime, witnesses saw Barbara Garber's green truck parked outside the Schultz home around 9:30 a.m. The stepbrothers took Eileen's car next, using it to commit their third crime, the robbery of Gibson Savings Bank, which happened around 10 a.m. There were no customers or security guards at the bank at that time, just a cashier and the manager. 2 masked robbers dressed in ski masks, gloves, and work clothes stormed in. Pointing a gun at the manager's head, one of them went straight to the safe, stuffing all the cash into plastic trash bags. They left the bank with $65,000. The police and the FBI were alerted immediately, and the investigation kicked off without delay. Though the robbers wore masks, bank employees described them as white males. Unfortunately, the bank had no security cameras, making it harder for investigators to gather evidence beyond witness statements. An additional witness, a 10-year-old girl riding her bike on the street, saw 2 masked men carrying bags as they exited a gray car and entered the bank. She quickly rode away before the criminals left the scene. Investigators issued an alert for the car. About 2 miles from the bank in rural Gibson, behind some grain containers, the stepbrothers ditched Eileen's gray car and continued their escape in the pickup truck of their first victim. A police officer found the abandoned vehicle and soon identified it as belonging to Eileen Schultz. Heading to the Schultz home nearby, the officer found Eileen on the floor with a gunshot wound, dead. Beside her lay an audio cassette and 2.22 caliber bullets, the same type used in the murder of Barbara Garber. There were no signs of forced entry or defensive wounds. For the authorities, it was easy to link the three crimes that occurred in less than 2.5 hours and within 5 miles of each other, especially in a town where such incidents were extremely rare. Ballistic analysis later confirmed that both Barbara and Island were killed with the same weapon, a .22 caliber semi-automatic pistol. The massive attention from the media and the panic in the community drove the police and FBI to intensify their investigation. Officers received hundreds of calls with tips related to the case. One came from a young person who saw the green truck with 2 men on board in Oskaloosa. Another witness in Oskaloosa reported seeing a young man from the town between 10:30 and 11 a.m. on June 11th, driving a truck that had not been seen before. It was Jamie who was seen driving around in the blue car. There was another passenger, but the witness couldn't get a good look at them. By the end of that day, investigators had Jamie's name and a description of one of the suspects. The next day, they arrived at the last known address of Jamie McMahon, his parents' house in Oskaloosa. His parents mentioned they hadn't seen him since the day of the crime and shared that his stepbrother Chris, who had been inseparable from Jamie in recent weeks, was also missing. Jamie's friends told the police that they had seen the 2 stepbrothers together the night before the crimes, driving a blue car. This matched the vehicle that a neighbor had seen early in the morning outside Barbara Garber's house. A friend of Jamie's also revealed that on the day before the crimes, Jamie had come to his house with Christopher and had asked to borrow something unusual, a gun. He handed over a .22 caliber semi-automatic pistol. This information sparked a massive search for the stepbrothers and the green truck they were traveling in. The search spanned over 1,000 miles across 6 states, keeping Americans on edge and the community of Gibson terrified. Mandy, 17, and Amanda, 16, best friends from Oskaloosa, were reported missing by their parents the night before the brothers' crime spree. Unbeknownst to their families, Mandy and Amanda had been at the party Jamie and Chris threw at a hotel in Oskaloosa the night before the crimes. The next morning, June 11th, while the girls were still asleep, the young men carried out the murders and the bank robbery. After the crime spree, the stepbrothers picked up the girls from the hotel in the stolen green truck. They offered the girls a free trip to Florida, which the impressed teenagers accepted without asking many questions. At one point during their trip, they stopped at a river where the fugitives threw a bag into the water. Together, the 4 young people visited Branson, Missouri, and Walt Disney World. For the girls, it seemed like a fun vacation. After 7 days, Jamie and Chris confessed to the girls about the crimes they had committed. At the same time, Jamie reached out to his ex-girlfriend to find out what the police knew about him. Unbeknownst to him, one of the FBI's strategies was to place a device on the girl's phone to record and trace any calls from the fugitive. Although Jamie hung up quickly, the conversation lasted long enough for the FBI to trace the number. The police located him at a hotel in Florida, where staff confirmed that the young men had been there with the 2 teenagers, Mandy and Amanda. After their wild escapade, they had already left the scene. In an attempt to evade recognition, Chris even dyed his hair. 3 days later, in a drug-induced state, Jamie told Mandy and Amanda that he wouldn't mind killing them too. Terrified by this threat, the girls told them they wanted to go home. After some argument, Jamie reluctantly gave them money for a taxi and train fare back home. Once back in Oskaloosa, the girls went straight to the police and explained that as soon as they wanted to leave after finding out about the crimes, Jamie and Chris had held them captive. They were finally set free after 10 days. The girls claimed they had no idea where the stepbrothers were headed next. Soon after, there was a new discovery. An officer found in the A River the bag the stepbrothers had thrown away. Inside were the ski masks and work clothes Jamie McMahon and Chris Kaufman had worn during the bank robbery, as well as Island's wallet with her ID. The fugitive stepbrothers managed to evade a nationwide manhunt for about 3 weeks. There were sightings as far away as Texas and Minnesota. On June 30th, 1997, 19 days after the crimes, a man in Pensacola, Florida, called the police to report a 1997 green Dodge Dakota, the same vehicle the authorities were searching for. He said the driver looked just like Jamie McMahon. The caller even recognized the license plate while driving on Interstate 10. The case gained national attention after the vehicle and a description of the crimes were broadcast twice on America's Most Wanted, leading to their identification. Immediately, the county police started a thorough search for the vehicle. An officer found the truck at a motel. The stepbrothers had removed the front license plate in an attempt to confuse the authorities, but it was indeed the vehicle they were looking for. The police questioned the receptionist who, upon seeing their photos, confirmed that the 2 young men were staying there. However, she added that there was a third man with them. Fearing that the fugitives might have taken a new hostage, officers evacuated the motel. A SWAT team along with negotiators arrived. Snipers were positioned, and officers surrounded the area. A negotiator called the room's phone, and the unidentified man answered. It quickly became clear he was not a hostage. He informed the officers that he had met the stepbrothers a few days ago while hitchhiking and had been partying with them. He explained that Jamie and Chris had been awake for 4 days, high on methamphetamines, and were now finally asleep. The man on the phone was shocked to learn that they were murderers and that they were armed. As the frightened man was unsure what to do, and the negotiator was trying to persuade him to leave the room, the stepbrothers woke up. Jamie grabbed the phone and the officer asked him to let the innocent man go. After 2 hours of tense negotiations, the man finally walked out of the room with his hands up. He had met the fugitives in New Orleans and spent a couple of days with them. He reported that the room was filled with lots of money and drugs, and as far as he could see, there was only one gun. The negotiator managed to speak with Chris over the phone, who was very tired and not in a clear state of mind to make decisions. Therefore, the negotiator turned back to Jamie and asked him to help his younger brother out of this situation. Jamie did just that, convincing Chris to leave the room with his hands raised. Only Jamie remained, exhausted, continuously handling the gun as if contemplating suicide and feeling utterly lost. He sought help over the phone from the negotiator. The officer convinced him to try to stay alive and surrender. Finally, he did. After 4 grueling hours, Jamie McMahon surrendered to the authorities, ending a lengthy chase that had taken him and his stepbrother across 6 states. The authorities searched the room, recovering $29,000 of the $65,000 stolen from the bank and the .22 caliber semi-automatic pistol. Empty beer bottles, marijuana, and methamphetamines rounded out the grim scene. Over 3 weeks, the stepbrothers had blown through $36,000 on drugs, hotels, and women. Back in Iowa, McMahon and Kaufman faced charges of first-degree murder and robbing a federal bank. They returned to a community that had been deeply concerned and frightened while awaiting their capture. Chris confessed to the crimes to the authorities, thinking that doing so might preempt his stepbrother from pinning both murders on him. Looking gaunt after weeks of heavy drug use, Kaufman gave a 95-minute interview where he insisted that the timing of the crimes hadn't been well planned and that they killed the women simply to eliminate potential witnesses. He claimed it was Jamie's idea to rob the bank and that they needed a car for the job. Jamie had already set his sights on Barbara Garber's truck, which he liked and wanted for their crimes. Barbara knew Jamie, which is why she let them into her house. As soon as she did, Chris pulled out the gun and ordered Barbara to sit down. Jamie repeatedly urged his brother to do it, and the young 18-year-old simply complied. Chris admitted to shooting 52-year-old Barbara Garber 4 times in the head. He claimed he did it to prevent her from reporting the theft of her truck. He described the brutal murders casually, as if discussing the weather, in a monotonous tone to an agent from Iowa's Criminal Investigation Division. "I just sat there for a while and then I did it," he explained. When asked how he felt about killing the 52-year-old grandmother, Chris admitted to feeling a bit guilty, but ultimately felt that all he had to do was pull the trigger. Since Jamie was particularly fond of Barbara's truck, they decided to steal a different car to rob the bank, then abandon it to continue their escape in the pickup. McMahon decided to visit another acquaintance island. She let them in after Jamie asked to borrow money supposedly for gas. She gave them $5, and as she turned around to put a cassette in the music player, Jamie shot her in the back of the head. To make sure she was dead, he shot her again between the eyes after she had fallen to the floor. Then they took the car keys and the wallet of Island and finally fled. Chris strongly denied having shot Island, and the authorities confirmed that it was Jamie who took the life of the 18-year-old, which he later admitted in court. When asked if he would do it all over again, Chris said he probably wouldn't do exactly the same thing. "I wouldn't kill anyone," he stated. The young man requested a psychiatric evaluation, asserting that he knew he could be capable of killing someone in prison if they tried to bother him. The stepbrothers were each sentenced to 5 life terms after pleading guilty to first-degree murder, car theft, and armed bank robbery. They agreed to plead guilty on the condition that federal prosecutors would not seek the death penalty. The father of the stepbrothers insisted that both Jamie and Chris were good kids at heart. "If they did this, we feel drugs were the cause. That's the only thing that could have been," he said. Methamphetamine use was on the rise in the region around that time. In 1997, Iowa was identified as one of the top 5 states in the U.S. where the use of methamphetamine. Known as the poor man's cocaine, it began to gain followers in the working-class areas of southeast Iowa due to its ease of manufacture and relative affordability. Health experts note that methamphetamine use can lead to paranoid behavior, weight loss, bad temper, and irritability. 20 years after the crimes, at 42 years old and having spent nearly half his life behind bars, Jamie McMahon decided to end his life. In November 2017, he was found unconscious in his cell. Authorities determined it was an apparent suicide. Despite immediate life-saving attempts by the medical staff, Jamie was declared dead at 10:30 a.m. Jamie and Chris's story is a stark reminder of how drugs can lead to disastrous and irreversible decisions. These guys wanted to endlessly extend their ecstasy from drugs, alcohol, parties, and women. To fund their lifestyle, they made the most insane decision to rob a bank. But then they needed a getaway car, and in that chain of poor choices, they murdered 2 women without any mercy to accomplish what they wanted. And that wraps up today's episode of Unreal True Crime. Don't forget to subscribe and hit like if you appreciate my work. Until next time. The Likens couple had an unstable marriage. They often traveled around Indiana selling candy, beer, and soda at carnival stands throughout the summer, frequently relocating and consistently facing severe financial challenges. The Likens sons regularly traveled with them to help with their work, but Sylvia and Jenny were discouraged from joining, mainly out of concern for their safety and education. As a result, the sisters often stayed with relatives, usually their grandmother. By June 1965, Sylvia and Jenny were living with their parents in Indianapolis. On July 3rd, their mother was arrested and subsequently jailed for shoplifting. Shortly after, Lester Likens arranged for his daughters to stay with Gertrude Banaszewski, a mother of two girls, Paula and Stephanie, whom the sisters had recently met at Arsenal Technical High School. When making this arrangement, Gertrude assured Lester that she would take care of his daughters as if they were her own children, but the reality would prove tragically different. Sylvia Marie Likens was born on January 3, 1949, in Lebanon, Indiana, USA. She was the third of 5 children born to carnival workers Lester Likens and his wife, Betty Likens, formerly Grimes when she was single. Sylvia grew up between 2 sets of twins, Daniel and Diana, who were 2 years older, and Benny and Jenny, who were a year younger. Her little sister Jenny had polio, which weakened one of her legs significantly, causing her to limp noticeably. She had to wear a steel brace on her leg to help her walk. Her parents, Lester and Betty, had a rocky marriage. They often sold candy, beer, and soft drinks at carnival booths throughout Indiana all summer long, constantly moving and frequently facing serious financial difficulties. The Likens children sometimes traveled with them to help out, but Sylvia and Jenny often stayed with relatives, mostly with their grandmother. This arrangement not only kept the young girls safe, but also allowed them to continue their education more steadily. From a young age, Sylvia took on babysitting and did errands for neighbors and friends. She also did household chores like ironing clothes, earning a little bit of money to buy things for herself. She often shared her earnings with her mom. Those who knew her said Sylvia was a friendly, confident, and charming girl. She had long, wavy, light brown hair that fell just below her shoulders. Her friends called her Cookie. Despite her vibrant personality, Sylvia was self-conscious about her smile because she was missing a front tooth, which she lost while playing with one of her brothers as a child. She loved music, especially the Beatles, and was very protective of her younger sister Jenny. Jenny was much shyer and less secure. The sisters often visited a local skating rink where Sylvia would help Jenny skate, holding her hand as Jenny relied heavily on her stronger leg. In June 1965, Sylvia and Jenny Likens were living with their parents in Indianapolis. The following month, their mother was arrested and later jailed for theft. Shortly thereafter, Lester arranged for his younger daughters to stay with Gertrude Banaszewski, a mother of 2 girls, Paula and Stephanie, whom the Likens sisters had met at Arsenal Technical High School. Gertrude assured Lester that she would look after the girls as if they were her own until his return. A little after the 4th of July celebrations, the Likens sisters moved to 3850 East New York Street, while their father, older brothers, and later their mother went to the East Coast with the carnival. The deal with Gertrude was that she would receive $20 a week in exchange for hosting Sylvia and Jenny and taking care of them until they returned in November. Initially, everything at the Banaszewski home seemed normal. Sylvia got along well with Stephanie, singing along to pop records and willingly helping with household chores. The Likens sisters regularly attended Sunday school with the other Banaszewski children, and the pastor praised Sylvia's kindness and respect for sacred matters. Although Lester had agreed to pay Gertrude, the payments started to arrive late, usually a day or 2 beyond the scheduled dates. However, this delay soon began to irritate Gertrude. Out of frustration, she started mistreating the girls, beginning with spanking them on their bare buttocks with various instruments, such as a 1/4 inch thick paddle, making statements such as, "Well, I took care of you 2 little bitches for a week for nothing." As the payment delays became more frequent, the beatings and mistreatment escalated. On one occasion, both girls were hit about 15 times on the back with the paddle after Paula accused them of eating too much at a church dinner they had attended with the other children. It had only been a month since they had been staying with the Banishevsky family, and it was now the end of August. By that time, Gertrude had begun to focus all her frustration and abuse almost exclusively on Sylvia. Some speculated that jealousy might have been the driving factor, as Sylvia was not only beautiful, but also had her whole life ahead of her. As the days went by, the abuse and mistreatment escalated. In addition to more frequent beatings, the sisters, particularly Sylvia, were starved. Often they were only given leftovers or spoiled food from the trash cans. On one occasion, Sylvia was accused of stealing candies, though she had actually bought them. Another time, she was publicly humiliated. Sylvia claimed she had a boyfriend in Long Beach, whom she had met in the spring when her family lived in California. As she shared stories about those days with Stephanie and Jenny, Sylvia mentioned that once she had snuggled under the covers with her boyfriend. Hearing this, Gertrude asked, "Why did you do that, Sylvia?" Sylvia shrugged and replied, "I don't know," and shrugged. A few days later, Gertrude brought up the topic again, suggesting mockingly, "Your stomach seems to be getting bigger, Sylvia. Looks like you might be having a baby." Sylvia thought it was a joke and responded, "Yeah, it must be getting big then." The abuse escalated. Gertrude repeatedly brought up Sylvia's interactions with boys, insinuating that any contact would surely lead to pregnancy. Suddenly, one day she kicked Sylvia in the genitals. Paula, one of Gertrude's daughters who was overweight, 3 months pregnant, and jealous of Sylvia's looks, joined in the attack. She pulled Sylvia from her chair to the kitchen floor and yelled, "You're not fit to sit in a chair." On another occasion, while the family was having dinner, Gertrude, Paula, and a neighborhood boy named Randy Gordon Lepper forced Sylvia to eat a hot dog overloaded with mustard, ketchup, and other spices. Naturally, Sylvia vomited, and they cruelly made her swallow what she had thrown up. Exhausted from all the abuse, Sylvia apparently spread a rumor at school accusing Stephanie and Paula of prostitution. One day, a boy made propositions to Stephanie at school, mentioning Sylvia had started the rumor. When they got home from school, Stephanie confronted Sylvia, who admitted to starting the rumor. In retaliation, Stephanie punched Sylvia hard. Sylvia, crying, apologized, and Stephanie also started crying. Randolph Hubbard, 15, Stephanie's boyfriend, learned about the incident and the rumors and brutally attacked Sylvia. He slapped her, slammed her head against the wall, and then threw her down on the floor. Gertrude also joined in, repeatedly using the paddle to beat Sylvia. Every day at the Banishevsky residence was a nightmare, with the episodes of violence only worsening. On one occasion, Paula punched Sylvia in the face with such force that she fractured her own wrist, focusing all her blows on Sylvia's mouth and eyes. Later, Paula used the cast on her arm to hit Sylvia even harder. But the violence wasn't just physical. The Lycan sisters were also subjected to verbal and psychological abuse. On one occasion, Gertrude accused Sylvia of being promiscuous and engaging in prostitution. She delivered a lengthy tirade about the filth of prostitution and the degradation of women in general. Afterwards, she forced young Jenny to hit her own older sister, threatening that if she didn't comply, she would suffer the same fate as Sylvia. The assaults on the Lycans girls didn't only come from the Banishevsky family. Coy Hubbard and several of his classmates frequently visited Gertrude's home and tormented Sylvia both physically and verbally. Often Gertrude's own children, and even Gertrude herself, would join in to inflict harm on Sylvia. The neighborhood children routinely beat Sylvia. Sometimes they used her as a practice dummy in violent judo sessions, sawing her body, burning her skin with burning sticks. They went so far as to severely injure little Sylvia's genitals. To entertain Gertrude and her teenage accomplices, Sylvia was forced to undress in the living room and masturbate with a bottle. Afterwards, Gertrude would tell everyone that this act of humiliation was to show Jenny what kind of girl her sister was. Over time, Gertrude banned Sylvia from attending school after she confessed to stealing a gym suit from school. She had only taken it because Gertrude refused to buy her clothes. This not only disrupted her education but also led to severe punishment. Gertrude repeatedly beat Sylvia with a 7-centimeter wide police belt. Gertrude shifted the conversation to the evils of premarital sex and then brutally kicked Likens in the genitals. During this attack, Stephanie came to Likens' defense, shouting, "She didn't do anything." Gertrude continued her torment by burning Likens' fingertips with matches before further whipping her. A few days later, Gertrude again used the police belt to repeatedly whip Jenny after she reportedly stole a single tennis shoe from school to wear on her stronger foot. Due to the increasing frequency and brutality of the torture and mistreatment, Sylvia gradually became incontinent. She was denied access to the bathroom and was forced to wet herself as a form of punishment for her incontinence. On October 6, 1965, Gertrude threw Sylvia Likens into the basement and tied her up. She often kept Sylvia naked, barely fed her, and frequently denied her water. Sylvia was almost always tied to the stair railing in the basement, with her feet barely touching the ground. The Banaszewski family occasionally paused their physical and mental torment to watch their favorite TV shows. They even involved neighborhood boys who paid 5 cents each to see Sylvia's body displayed and to participate in humiliating her, beating her, burning her, and ultimately mutilating her. During her captivity in the basement, Gertrude and her children tied and gagged Sylvia, then placed her in a bathtub filled with scalding water. They proceeded to rub salt into her wounds. Shortly after this incident, the father of a neighborhood boy named Michael John Monroe anonymously called Arsenal School to report that a girl with open sores all over her body was living at the Banaszewski house. Since Sylvia had not attended school for several days, a school nurse visited Gertrude's address to investigate. Gertrude told the nurse that Sylvia had run away from home the previous week and that she did not know her whereabouts. She added that Sylvia was out of control and that her open sores were the result of her refusal to maintain personal hygiene. Gertrude also claimed that Sylvia was a bad influence on both her own children and her sister. The school did not conduct any further investigations into Sylvia's whereabouts or well-being. In mid-October, John Banaszewski Jr. cruelly tormented Sylvia by offering her a plate of soup and swiftly pulling it away as she tried to eat with her hands. By then, Sylvia was already suffering from extreme malnutrition. That day, Gertrude Banaszewski allowed Sylvia to sleep upstairs, but only on the condition that she did not wet the bed. At night, Sylvia quietly asked Jenny to give her a glass of water in secret before she went to sleep. The next morning, Gertrude discovered that the girl had peed herself. As punishment, she was once again forced to masturbate using a glass bottle in the presence of the Banaszewski children. Shortly thereafter, Gertrude shouted for Likens to return to the kitchen, then ordered her to strip naked before proclaiming to her, "You have branded my daughters. Now I am going to brand you." She began carving the words, "I'm a prostitute and proud of it," onto Likens' abdomen with a heated needle. When Gertrude was unable to complete the markings, she instructed one of the neighborhood kids, 14-year-old Richard Dean Hobbs, to finish etching the words into Likens' flesh as she took Jenny to a nearby grocery store. in what Hobbs would later insist were short, light etchings. He continued to brand the text into Likens' abdomen as she clenched her teeth and moaned. Richard, like 10-year-old Shirley, took Sylvia to the basement, where they each proceeded to use an anchor bolt in an attempt to burn the letter S beneath Likens' left breast, although they applied one section of the loop backwards, and this deep burn scar would resemble the number 3. On that grim night, after enduring terrible abuse, Sylvia told her sister Jenny, "I know you don't want me to die, but I'm going to die, I'm sure of it." The next day, Gertrude woke Sylvia and forced her to write a letter while dictating its contents. The plan was sinister. They intended to deceive the Likens' parents into believing that Sylvia had run away from the Banishevsky residence. The content of this letter was intended to frame a group of anonymous local boys for extensively abusing and mutilating Likens after she had initially agreed to engage in sexual relations with them before they inflicted the extreme abuse and torture upon her body. After Likens had written this letter, Gertrude finished formulating her plan to have John Jr. and Jenny blindfold Sylvia, then take her to a nearby wooded area known as Jimmy's Forest and leave her there to die. Sylvia was once again tied to the stair railing in the basement. Gertrude offered her cookies to eat, but Sylvia refused them, saying, "Give them to the dog, I don't want them." In response, Gertrude forcefully stuffed the cookies into Sylvia's mouth, and she and John began to beat her, focusing on her stomach. On the morning of October 26th, Sylvia was unable to speak intelligibly or coordinate her limb movements properly. Gertrude took her to the kitchen, leaned her against the wall, and tried to feed her a donut and a glass of milk, but Sylvia couldn't hold the glass properly. Frustrated, Gertrude threw Sylvia to the floor and then returned her to the basement. Soon after, Sylvia became delirious, moaning and muttering repeatedly. When Paula asked Sylvia to recite the English alphabet, Sylvia could not get past the first 4 letters or get up from the floor. That afternoon, several of the neighborhood tormentors gathered in the basement. Sylvia flailed her arms in an apparent attempt to point out the faces of the tormentors she recognized, shouting names like, "You're Ricky" and "You're Gertie." Minutes later, Sylvia tried unsuccessfully to bite into a rotten pear she was given, saying she couldn't feel her teeth. Hearing this, Jenny reminded her, "Don't you remember, Sylvia? Your front tooth fell out when you were 7 years old." Exhausted from all the abuse and certain she would die there, Sylvia desperately tried to escape the basement but collapsed without the strength to make it up the stairs. This attempt was met with the harshest of punishments. Gertrude struck Sylvia's head with excessive violence. Sylvia lost consciousness, and Gertrude just stood by, watching her for a while. Shortly after, at 5:30 p.m., Richard Hobbs returned to the Banishevsky residence and immediately went to the basement. He found Stephanie crying and embracing Sylvia's emaciated and lacerated body after their mother had ordered her to clean Sylvia's body. Stephanie and Richard then decided to give Sylvia a warm, soapy bath and dress her in clean clothes. They laid her on a mattress in one of the bedrooms. Sylvia murmured her last wish, hoping her father would be with her, or at least that she could be taken home. After enduring severe punishment and weakened from lack of food, Sylvia finally succumbed to her injuries and died. When Stephanie realized Sylvia wasn't breathing, she tried to perform mouth-to-mouth resuscitation, while Gertrude repeatedly screamed at the children in the house that Sylvia was faking her death. Initially, Gertrude hit Sylvia's body with a book, yelling at her that she was lying and pretending in an attempt to wake her. Soon, in a panic, Gertrude told Richard Hobbs to call the police from a nearby payphone. When the police arrived at their address around 6:30 p.m., Gertrude led the officers to the bedroom. She showed them Sylvia's extensively beaten and mutilated body lying on a dirty mattress. She then handed them the letter that Sylvia had been forced to write. Gertrude also claimed that she had been caring for the young girl for an hour or more before her death, after having applied antiseptic to Sylvia's wounds in a futile attempt at first aid. She told the police that Sylvia had run away from home with several teenagers before returning to her house that afternoon, bare-chested and with the note in her hands. Holding a Bible, Paula, having declared to everyone in the house that Sylvia's death was meant to happen, looked at Jenny and calmly said, "If you want to live with us, Jenny, we'll treat you like our own sister." Following instructions she had received before the police arrived, Jenny recited the rehearsed version of the events leading up to Sylvia's death before whispering to the officers to take them away and that she would tell them everything. The formal statement provided by Jenny Likens led to the arrest of Gertrude, Paula, Stephanie, and John Jr. Banaziewski on suspicion of Sylvia's murder, just hours after her body was discovered. The same day, Coy Hubbard and Richard Hobbs were also arrested and charged with the same crimes. The three older Banaziewski children, along with Coy Hubbard, were placed in a nearby juvenile detention center. The younger Banaziewski children and Richard Hobbs were held at the Indianapolis Child Guardian's home. All were detained without bail pending trial. Initially, Gertrude denied any involvement in Sylvia Likens' death, though just a day into her detention, she confessed to knowing the children and acknowledged that her daughter Paula and Coy Hubbard had physically and emotionally abused Sylvia. Gertrude also admitted to forcing the girl to sleep in the basement on approximately 3 occasions when she had wet the bed. She became evasive when an officer suggested that the probable reasons for Sylvia's incontinence were her mental distress and kidney injuries. Paula, showing no remorse, signed a statement admitting she had repeatedly beaten Sylvia. She also confessed to an incident where Sylvia's wrist was fractured and admitted to other acts of brutality, such as pushing her down the basement stairs 2 or 3 times. John Jr. confessed to whipping Sylvia once and often used his fist to abuse her. He admitted to burning Sylvia with matches on several occasions and added that his mother had repeatedly burned the girl with cigarettes. The autopsy of Sylvia Likens' body revealed she had suffered over 150 separate injuries across her body and was extremely emaciated at the time of her death. The injuries varied in location, nature, severity, and healing stage. They included burns, severe bruises, and extensive damage to muscles and nerves. Her vaginal cavity was swollen and nearly closed, though an examination determined her hymen was still intact, debunking Gertrude's claims that Sylvia had been 3 months pregnant and the accusations of prostitution and promiscuity. The official cause of Sylvia Marie Likens' death was identified as subdural hematoma, resulting from a strong blow to the right side of her head. The shock she suffered, primarily due to severe and prolonged damage to her skin and subcutaneous tissue, as well as chronic malnutrition, were also noted by the doctor in relation to Sylvia's death. Rigor mortis had fully developed by the time her body was discovered, indicating that Sylvia could have been dead for up to 8 hours before she was found. Although the autopsy doctor noted that Sylvia had been bathed recently, possibly post-mortem, this action could have accelerated the loss of body temperature and therefore the onset of rigor mortis. Gertrude Banaziewski, her eldest daughter Paula, her son John, and 2 neighborhood youths, Coy Hubbard and Richard Hobbs, were tried and convicted in May 1966 for the neglect, torture, and murder of Sylvia Likens. After 8 hours of deliberation, the jury found Gertrude Banaziewski guilty of first-degree murder. She was sentenced to life imprisonment but was paroled in 1985. Paula was found guilty of second-degree murder and was released in 1972. Hobbs, Hubbard, and John were found guilty of manslaughter and spent less than 2 years in the Indiana Reformatory before being granted parole on February 27, 1968. The citizens of Indiana consider the torture and murder of Sylvia Likens the worst crime ever committed in their state, and a lead investigator from the Indiana Police Department has described it as the most sadistic case he investigated in his 35 years of service. Sylvia died on October 26 in Indianapolis, Indiana, USA. Her parents were supposed to return for her and her sister in November, but Sylvia passed away before their arrival. The Likens sisters were fearful of reporting the increasing incidence of abuse and neglect to family members or adults at their school, worried that doing so might worsen their already dire situation. Both sisters feared that speaking out would only worsen their situation. Jenny, the younger sister, struggled against the urge to inform family members because Gertrude had threatened that she would be abused and tortured just as her sister was if she spoke up. Jenny also faced harassment from neighborhood girls who ridiculed or occasionally beat her whenever she mentioned Sylvia's situation. The closest neighbors of the Banishevsky residence, a middle-aged couple, along with other families in the neighborhood, suspected or had seen signs that the girls were being mistreated, but no one dared to report it to the authorities. Nothing was done to stop the abuse the Likens sisters were enduring, and no one could rescue them in time from this nightmare. All those involved in her torture and murder were sentenced to prison. Although some of the culprits did not serve their full sentences, they could not escape the scars and the horror they caused, which will follow them for the rest of their lives. With this, we conclude today's episode of Unreal True Crime. Once again, I remind you to subscribe and leave a like to let me know you appreciate my work. Good night, and see you next time. Today, we'll dive into the story of Vincent Gillis, a boy with bright blue eyes who transformed into something monstrous. But what goes on in the mind of a psychopath? Scientists have been trying to crack this mystery for years. Research suggests that psychopaths aren't necessarily more intelligent or misguided geniuses. They're average in terms of cognitive ability, but their emotional and reward systems don't function properly. This means they find pleasure and passion in actions that most people find appalling. Studies have also shown that psychopaths tend to have lower brain activity in emotional situations, like when experiencing fear or seeing someone else threatened. Essentially, they barely react when someone else is in danger. Two major factors play a crucial role in turning someone into a killer: their biological traits and their cultural environment. This includes their upbringing and social relationships. Despite these insights, it's important to note that not all psychopaths commit crimes or become murderers. Psychopaths generally believe they are above the law and are fully aware of their actions. They aren't victims of an illness. Sean Vincent Gillis appeared quite normal on the outside. Despite some early signs of violence, no one could have predicted what he was capable of as an adult. He turned into a whirlwind of crime and violence that lasted over a decade. Sean was born on June 24, 1962, in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, USA. His parents are Yvonne and Norman Gillis. His father struggled with alcoholism and mental health issues. Around the time of Sean's birth, a disturbing incident occurred that impacted the family deeply. Norman pointed a gun at the baby's head. After this, he decided to leave the family, fearing he might harm his son and wife. Norman drifted in and out of various mental health institutions and lost contact with his family. Sean was raised in southern Louisiana by his mother, with the support of his paternal grandparents. His mother worked full-time at a local TV station and often called Sean her little blue-eyed angel. According to Yvonne, Sean was a quiet, well-behaved child with average grades who enjoyed playing with model cars and got along well with other kids. When Sean was 10, he and his mother moved to another local neighborhood. Some neighbors thought Sean was a bit rough with other children. They lived in a small ranch-style house in a quiet, middle-class neighborhood. Sean attended Catholic schools, where he met one of his best friends, John Green. John found Sean to be very intelligent, respectful towards adults, and humorous. In 8th grade, another boy, John Rosas, joined their close-knit group. They hung out together, going to the movies, the mall, or each other's houses. As they grew older, they got into some minor trouble, including a phase where they dabbled in Satanism. They encountered people involved in such rituals and enjoyed the thrill of being scared. They also smoked marijuana together, which Sean seemed to enjoy more than the others. During his teens, Sean's more violent side began to emerge, with episodes of uncontrollable anger recurring repeatedly. Once, a neighbor, Caroline, heard loud banging at 3 in the morning. Looking outside, she saw Sean mercilessly beating some trash cans in her yard. He also expressed frustration to another neighbor about not having a girlfriend. Caroline described him as an angry young man prone to fits of rage, a side of Sean his mother never saw. At 17, Sean faced the death of his paternal grandfather, which led him to see his father for the first time since being abandoned as a baby. This reunion began the development of a relationship between father and son. Around this age, Sean also started his criminal record with minor infractions. Over the years, he was arrested for traffic violations, driving under the influence, possession of marijuana, and contempt of court. At 18, Sean discovered photos owned by his father that depicted men in various sexual positions, revealing his father's homosexuality, a fact that Sean found difficult to accept. By then, Norman had joined Alcoholics Anonymous to address his addiction. After high school, Sean attended various community technical institutes and juggled low-paying jobs while still living with his mother. One of his main jobs was at a convenience store chain. He eventually graduated from a community school with a degree in computer science. When Sean turned 30, his mother moved to Atlanta for a job offer. Refusing to move with her, Sean stayed behind, living alone for the first time in his mother's house. He soon felt lonely and became so obsessed with pornography that he began neglecting his jobs. His mother continued to send him money to help with financial difficulties. However, he was very angry with her for moving away and would sometimes scream in anger. Neighbors reported that he often lay on the grass at night, shouting loudly at the moon, including obscenities directed at his mother. In 1992, he was caught peeping through a neighbor's window as his obsession with pornography grew. In 1994, he met Terry, a girl who worked in a store, and they began dating. Her best friend introduced them, highlighting their shared interests in science fiction, the TV series Star Trek, and collecting memorabilia. To her, Sean was like a teddy bear, someone you'd bring home to meet your mother. While Terry didn't find Sean extraordinary, she valued his kindness and thoughtfulness. The only downside for her was his fondness for drinking. After their first date, a peculiar incident occurred. During an argument, Terry slapped him and Sean started crying. She immediately reassured him that it wouldn't happen again. After overcoming this incident, they established a stable relationship and moved in together into Sean's house a year later. Terry mentioned that Sean didn't believe in sex. He once told her that he had been taught it was something unpleasant and to be avoided. The same year he met his girlfriend, Sean began a crime spree that lasted nearly a decade. This softly spoken, seemingly intelligent man claimed he started killing due to stress. On March 21, 1994, he committed his first murder. He entered the St. James Place, a prestigious retirement home in Baton Rouge located across from where he worked. Around 3 in the morning, he managed to get inside when a nurse left the door unlocked. His victim was Ann Bryan, an 82-year-old woman. He attempted to assault her but froze when she screamed as he touched her. Losing control, he silenced her by stabbing and slashing her with a household knife he always carried. The ferocity of the stabs was such that he nearly decapitated the elderly woman. This crime shocked the Baton Rouge community. Meanwhile, Sean's obsession with pornography led him to websites displaying abuse and mutilation of women. He even once showed his girlfriend a picture of a deceased woman from one of these sites. She didn't pay much attention to it and continued their relationship, unaware of the depths of his depravity. Despite the brutality of his first murder, it took another 5 years before Sean killed again, and then the number of victims rapidly increased. He later confessed to a reporter that the pause was because he felt content during that time. On January 4, 1999, Catherine Ann Hall, a 29-year-old prostitute and drug addict living in a state housing project known for drug dealers and prostitution on North Street, became his second victim. She got into his car after he said he wanted her services. Once inside, he restrained her with a plastic zip tie. She tried to escape, but Sean grabbed and stabbed her. He struck her with the knife 16 times in total. After that, he removed her clothes and mutilated her body. Finally, he dumped her body in a secluded area. The next day, a squirrel hunter found her body lying face down on a rural road. For the police, it was a particularly macabre scene. She was positioned in a sort of ballet pose next to a dead-end street sign, a grim and sick joke indicating that the investigators were at a dead end. Months later, in May 1999, came the third victim. Sean began stalking a woman he had seen jogging in the southern metropolitan area of Baton Rouge. Her name was Hardy Schmidt, a 52-year-old married woman with 3 children, well known in her community. She loved running and had once participated in the Boston Marathon. For 3 weeks, Sean drove around the area looking for her. Around 5:30 a.m. on Sunday, May 30th, 1999, he finally saw her jogging along an avenue. Sean hit her with his white Chevy Cavalier as she jogged, knocking her into a ditch. He quickly got out of the car, forced her inside, placed a sturdy plastic zip tie around her neck, and drove to a park on Highland Road, where he assaulted her before killing her. He then put her body in the trunk of his car, where it stayed until 2 days later when he noticed a bad smell coming from the car, prompting him to dump her body in a swamp in a rural parish far from Baton Rouge. A cyclist eventually found her body. From then on, Sean committed seemingly unconnected murders, which prevented authorities from even realizing they were happening. He mercilessly murdered women by strangling them with a plastic zip tie after assaulting them. He would often cut them up, dismembering them, a dark and utterly evil practice. On November 12, 1999, he claimed his fourth victim, Joyce Williams, a 36-year-old prostitute. He took her to a sugarcane field beside the Mississippi River and strangled her with a plastic zip tie. Then he took her to his house to complete his gruesome ritual, and for the first time, he consumed the human flesh of a victim. After the murder, he left the body in the trunk of his car and went to pick up his girlfriend from work. Later that night, he dumped the body in a secluded area. It was not found until a month later. His next victim was Lillian Robinson, another 52-year-old prostitute whom he attacked in January 2000. He repeated his usual method and took her to his house, but he did not have time to finish because his girlfriend would soon be home from work. However, he did commit necrophilia. He then abandoned her body in the largest swamp in the United States, located in central southern Louisiana. In March, almost 2 months later, the corpse was discovered by some fishermen. In October, 38-year-old prostitute Marilyn Nevels became his next victim. He killed her in the same way as the others, and after bringing the body to his house, he showered with it before leaving it on top of a levee, unhidden about 3 miles from his home near the Mississippi River. The decomposing body was found on October 31st by a man walking in the woods. Sean did not kill again until October 2003, 3 years later, when he took the life of 45-year-old Johnny Mae Williams. He picked up a divorced mother of 3 who was also a prostitute and drug addict. Sean knew her well as she had cleaned his house several times over about 10 years. He took her to a remote area where he beat, abused, and strangled her, then mutilated her body with a knife. He took her hands as a souvenir. He left the body exposed on top of an embankment after positioning it in various poses to take photographs. When it was found, the body was so mutilated that East Baton Rouge's police commented that it was barely recognizable as a human being. Her legs had numerous cuts on the front and back. Despite finding the bodies of his victims, no weapons, witnesses, or current fingerprints were ever found. The police had no leads that could direct them to the killer, which left Sean free to continue his dark deeds. 2 serial criminals were operating in the area. In 2003, after nearly 11 years since his first crime, Sean's luck began to change. On May 27, 2003, Derek Todd Lee, another serial killer active in the Baton Rouge metropolitan area who had taken the lives of 7 women since 1992, was arrested. Sean admired this criminal, even keeping newspaper clippings about his crimes, aspiring to surpass him. With Lee's capture, the police started paying closer attention to unresolved cases involving women. When some of these crimes could not be linked to Derek, investigators began to suspect that another serial killer might have been operating simultaneously. Then, in February 2004, Sean committed what would be his 8th and final murder. He killed 43-year-old Donna Bennett Johnston, who had become a prostitute due to her drug addiction. She was heavily intoxicated, making it easy for him to lure her into his car. He took her to a secluded spot near his house. Unable to defend herself, Donna was abused and then strangled with a plastic wrap, like his previous victims. According to Sean, she became unconscious within seconds and then died. Her last words were, "I can't breathe." After killing her, he placed the body on the grass, removed all her clothes, and mutilated her body horrifically, committing cannibalism and cutting out a butterfly tattoo she had. Donna's body was discovered on February 27, 2004, in a canal south of Louisiana State University. It was, for many, Sean's most gruesome and sordid murder. Crucially, Donna had fought against her attacker, as evidenced by the DNA found under the nails of her right hand. Unfortunately, there was no match in the police records, but it was the same DNA found on 2 other bodies previously discovered, those of Catherine Ann Hall and Johnny Mae Williams. However, a tire print found near Donna's body proved to be Sean's undoing, and a stroke of luck for the investigators, who had until then had little to go on in the case. The police established a special task force to thoroughly investigate the deaths of Donna, Johnny, and Catherine, along with other similar unsolved murders. Highly specialized experts were dedicated to this effort. Detectives took photos and made casts of the Goodyear tire tracks, which were fortunately quite distinct. These tracks were linked to a unique set of tires, and Louisiana's State Crime Lab was able to determine their make, model, and type. They further narrowed down the possibilities when they discovered that this particular tire was only manufactured over a 3-year period that ended in 2003. Only 200 of these tires were sold in the Baton Rouge metropolitan area. Local authorities collaborated with Goodyear stores to track down those who had purchased this particular type of tire in the area. Investigators then conducted DNA tests on these individuals, including Sean. The aim was to compare their DNA samples with the evidence found on one of the victims' bodies. On April 28, 2004, it was Sean's turn to provide his DNA sample for the test. He was the 26th person on the list of buyers. A police agent questioned him at his home to request the sample, which Sean provided without any issue. However, his responses raised suspicions. He mentioned knowing Johnny because she had cleaned his house several times. He also explained that his vehicle's tire tracks were found near where Donna's body was discovered because he had stopped there to urinate. Lastly, he made a bizarre comment about finding blood in his car, claiming it was from a time when Johnny had a heavy menstrual period while he was driving her somewhere. The detective was convinced he was dealing with the right man but had to let him go that night while waiting for the DNA test results. Eventually, the test confirmed the detective's suspicions. He was indeed the murderer. The following day, April 29, 2004, a special task force returned to the house and arrested Sean for murder. As he was being handcuffed, he looked at Terry and simply said, "I'm sorry." One of the officers approached Terry and asked if she knew she had been living with a serial killer. Her world collapsed that night. Sean had been her partner for 9 years. It was unbelievable what was happening. Later that same day, Sean confessed to his crimes while the police executed a search warrant at his house, leading to astonishing discoveries. Detectives found 45 digital photographs on his computer that showed the mutilated body of Donna, as well as the corpse in the trunk of his car. They also uncovered photos of other victims. The authorities seized 8 saws, including one for cutting metal, several knives, a machete, plastic zip ties, a 14-inch bayonet, a wooden bludgeon, 6 pocket-sized Playboy magazines, and newspaper clippings about Derek Lee's last victim. One of his computers also contained files on murders and necrophilia. Additionally, several books on both fiction and nonfiction about serial killers were confiscated. Sean confessed to his murders with a mix of pride and sadness for what he had done. He expressed regret for deceiving people, but admitted he would do it again, and that if released, he would find someone before nightfall.
I'm sorry I hurt people, but I would do it again.
In May 2004, FBI agents interviewed Sean. His darkest side emerged. During the conversation, he told the officials that he was playing a chess game with them as they investigated each of the crime scenes. He used TV news to strategize his next move and assess whether he was winning the game. He claimed he was the chess master then and they would never win. His main interest was whether they found the body, where, and in what condition. He then explained to the agents how he used a combination of charm and money to lure his victims into his vehicle. He recounted how the prostitutes loved him because he treated them with respect, like ladies, even though he had no specific plan or agenda on when or where he would kill his next victim. It all depended on when the opportunity presented itself. However, he always paid close attention to when and where to dispose of the bodies. One of the most striking aspects of this case was how Sean successfully hid his double life from his partner. He made sure to pick her up after work and she never suspected a thing. Once, she noticed a bad smell coming from the trunk of the car, and he told her it was a dead animal that had hit his car. He cleaned the vehicle immediately. Another time, Terry noticed the car's mileage increasing rapidly due to the trips John made to find his victims and then dispose of the bodies. However, she only suspected that he might be cheating on her with another woman. Terry had to hear it from John himself to believe what the police were saying. She asked him if he did it, and he admitted it and expressed his regret. Sean was charged with his crimes at different times as investigators worked to find evidence that would support his confession to the murders. For example, the police had no idea about the crime committed against Marilyn Nevels. Marilyn had been missing for 4 years, a fact Sean confessed to. Her disappearance had never been reported. Meanwhile, the crime lab continued to search the house for traces of blood, bones, and tissues. This led them to realize that Sean had kept some parts of his dismembered victims' bodies in his house as souvenirs. The photographs helped him relive the murders. It was determined that he had consumed the flesh of his victims, committed necrophilia with the corpses, and even showered with one of the dead bodies and painted the nails of the hands he had mutilated. In the aftermath of Sean's arrest, a friend of Donna, his last victim for over a decade, sent a letter to the criminal. He responded with several letters in which he expressed some remorse for the murders he committed, especially for mutilating the bodies. He mentioned that he didn't talk much with Donna and that sex was not his intention. He described that night as one filled with pure evil, devoid of compassion, faith, mercy, or hope. He blamed his lack of faith and his long-standing hatred towards God. He admitted he didn't really understand what came over him and confessed that even 10 years earlier, he could never have imagined harming anyone. He described it as a mystery why he did those things to the corpse, and something deep in his subconscious told him he needed those macabre actions. He also stated that sometimes he committed the murders without knowing what he was doing. In another part of the letter, he expressed deep regret for killing those women. In the end, he showed repentance and stated he did not want to die, but that was up to the Almighty. He also declared his love for his family, now realizing he truly loved them, that God loved him, and he loved God. Donna's friend passed away in 2005 from complications related to AIDS, but before her death, she handed over Sean's letters to the prosecutors, which were used in the trials against him to demonstrate his culpability for the crimes. Initially, Sean was tried for the murder of Joyce Williams. During the trial, Sean's girlfriend testified that he confessed the crime to her because he needed to make things right with God. In 2007, after years of judicial delays, he was sentenced to life imprisonment for that crime. The following year, on July 21, 2008, in a unanimous verdict, he was found guilty of the murders of 3 more of his victims. This moved the trial into the sentencing phase. The defense brought a doctor to the stand who testified that Sean exhibited signs of schizoaffective disorder, arguing that he should not be considered mentally capable. Relatives of the victims also testified. Lauren Williams, the daughter of Johnny Mae Williams, confronted him from the stand and asked why he did it. He shrugged and simply said, "I'm sorry." But she did not believe in his repentance. On July 31st at 3:03 p.m., the jury began deliberations on what Sean's sentence should be. At 5:45 p.m., they returned to the courtroom without having reached an agreement on the prosecution's request for the death penalty. As a result, Sean was sentenced to life imprisonment with hard labor without the possibility of parole. Later, in 2013, he was found guilty of second-degree murder and received another life sentence for the deaths of Ann Bryan and Hardy Schmidt. He was incarcerated in the Louisiana State Penitentiary, where he remains to this day. No one knows for sure what stirred in Sean's subconscious, and it seems there may never be an answer. But one shocking revelation came when the district attorney questioned him, and he admitted he would have liked to have had relations with his mother. His mother's departure to another city, leaving him on his own, unleashed a rage that no one could have imagined, leading to the most horrifying murders. What's most disturbing is that despite growing up without his father, Sean was a love child and never showed signs of being capable of such atrocities. Over time, perhaps because he had evaded suspicion for so many years, he began to display the bodies of his victims openly, as if they were his sinister trophies. Moreover, he knew how to choose his victims, hunting for prostitutes, drug addicts, and anyone willing to get into his car, people who had no one to miss them, the outcasts of society. However, he also included at least 2 individuals from better economic backgrounds, which helped him avoid sticking too closely to a single pattern. His confidence in not being caught, thinking he was winning the chess game against the police, underscores the narcissistic, grandiose, and egomaniacal character of this serial killer. The interviews in which he revealed his crimes are chilling, as they showed a man speaking calmly about heinous acts, without a tremor in his voice. It seemed as if he wanted to shout it from the rooftops to let everyone know he was pure evil. And with that, we wrap up today's episode of Unreal True Crime. Don't forget to subscribe and hit like to let me know you appreciate my work. Until next time. In April 2019, on a seemingly ordinary day in Chicago, Marlon Ochoa Lopez, a 19-year-old pregnant woman, eagerly awaited the birth of her baby. 9 months pregnant and full of maternal anticipation, Marlon connected with a woman on a Facebook group for mothers, drawn by an offer that seemed too kind to refuse. The woman, a stranger from the internet, had offered Marlon free baby clothes and a stroller, an act of generosity that resonated with Marlon's current needs. The arrangement led Marlon to schedule a meeting to pick up the items. With hopes high and her family unaware of the risks, she left her home that day, stepping into a situation fraught with unknown danger. As the hours ticked by, Marlon did not return and her phone went silent. Her family's worry escalated with each unreturned call, each passing moment leading to an increasingly dire situation. Unknown to them at the time, this meeting was not just a simple exchange of goods, but the beginning of a heartbreaking mystery. Marlon Ochoa Lopez was a 19-year-old Latina mother who was nearly 9 months pregnant with a second child. She went missing on April 23, 2019, in a southwestern suburb of Chicago, United States. The last time she was seen was as she was leaving her school. She was expected to give birth on May 5th and was supposed to pick up her 3-year-old son from daycare, but she never showed up. On the morning of her disappearance, at around 10:40 a.m., Marlon texted her husband, saying that she was not feeling well and thought labor might be starting soon. By 6 p.m., Giovanni called his mother-in-law to ask about Marlon's whereabouts because the daycare had called to say no one came to pick up their son. The family initially thought that Marlon might have gone into labor, so her mother and stepfather began calling various hospitals and even visited some in hopes of finding her, but they were unsuccessful. Her mother and husband tried to reach her multiple times through text, but she did not respond. That night, her family went to a Chicago police station to report her missing. The officers there told them they had to wait 24 hours before filing a missing persons report. The next day, on April 24th, they returned to file the report. No immediate alert was issued. They were told that only the husband could file the report. Giovanni subsequently filed the report, but the police did not publicize it until 2 days later. On April 25th, the family received news that a patient with Marlon's name had been admitted for a cesarean section at a hospital. However, upon arriving, they were informed that it had been a mix-up with another patient's name. The family continued to call and visit hospitals in the hope that Marlon was somehow giving birth. At this point, they ruled out the possibility that she had been kidnapped, as there had been no ransom calls. Members of Marlon's family and their friends took to social media to seek help. The first clue came when some people sent screenshots to Marlon's mother, Raquel, showing a Facebook mothers group Marlon had recently joined and posted in. Nothing suspicious was found, but all this information was handed over to detectives investigating the case. On the morning of the next day, family members received a call from someone claiming to be part of a cartel. The caller said they had Marlon and had taken her to Mexico, demanding $1,000 for her release before hanging up. The family feared the worst and immediately reported this to the police. Authorities suspected it was likely a scam given the low amount of money requested. Due to the lack of progress in the case, the police finally decided to issue a high-risk missing person alert 72 hours after Marlon's disappearance was initially reported. In the alert, it was mentioned that Marlon Ochoa was 9 months pregnant and was last seen leaving her school. She was last seen wearing gray sweatpants and a maroon blouse with her school's logo. By April 28th, flyers began to circulate throughout the neighborhood, and police started questioning family and friends, including her husband Giovanni, as Marlon's parents suspected he might be involved. Days went by without any leads on her whereabouts, only further steps from people who claimed to have seen her. In desperation and with the lack of progress from the police, the family hired a private investigator who spoke Spanish for 35 hours of work. A press conference was held on May 2nd where her parents pleaded for her safe return, suspecting she might be held against her will. Julia, a former school social worker, mentioned during the conference that investigators should look into Marlon's Facebook group interactions, particularly with a person named Clarissa Figueroa. May 5th, Marlon's due date came and went without any information about her whereabouts. There were suspicions that someone was holding her captive until she gave birth. Hope remained that she would be found. 2 days later, the police began to scrutinize screenshots of Facebook conversations between Marlon and Clarissa Figueroa. They discovered that Marlon had agreed to meet with Clarissa on the day she disappeared to pick up baby clothes and supplies. The police then traced this to an address in Chicago, Illinois. When detectives arrived at the location, they were met by Clarissa's daughter, Desiree, who told them that her mother was not home and had recently given birth. The detectives left, but on a nearby street, they found Marlon's Honda Civic parked half a block away from Clarissa's home. The family was notified of this discovery the next day. In another development, Marlon's mother received news that a newborn baby had been found in an alley in the northwest part of the city and was taken to a hospital. They immediately thought it could be Marlon's baby and hoped she was still alive. However, their hopes were short-lived when a detective called the next day to inform them that the baby found was not Marlon's, as the DNA did not match her husband's. Amid the false leads, a man claimed to have seen Marlon begging for money on a street in the center of Chicago. However, when they went there, they found no one, even after combing through the streets. While the family continued their search, Chicago police visited Clarissa Figueroa at the hospital where she claimed to have given birth. The hospital records did show a baby admitted that day, but the infant was in intensive care with no brain activity. Incredibly, the police did not investigate further and took Clarissa's word that she had given birth, even though she showed no physical signs of having recently delivered a baby. The hospital social worker also failed to question her further. By May 9th, a walk was organized to distribute flyers in the area where Marlon's car had been found. Meanwhile, the Illinois Department of Children and Family Services was alerted about suspicions surrounding Clarissa's newborn and took the baby into protective custody. That afternoon, Giovanni Lopez, Marlon's husband, underwent a DNA test to determine if he was the father. Saliva samples were taken from the infant, and hair samples were taken from Marlon's husband for comparison. Despite the lack of progress and communication from the police, an anonymous person contacted the family the next day. This person claimed to have seen Marlon enter Figueroa's home on the day she disappeared and provided the address. When the family relayed this to the police, they were told that without a court-approved warrant, they could not enter the property. On May 12th, further clues emerged in the form of screenshots from a GoFundMe page, apparently set up by the Figueroas to raise money for the newborn, who was on life support. However, due to many previous false leads, the family did not initially pay much attention to this. What they did not know was that they would soon find the answers they had been desperately seeking. It was then that they received the DNA test results, which confirmed that the baby's father was Giovanni Lopez. The Department of Children and Family Services granted custody of the child. While they were relieved to know this, the question remained, where was Marlon? They would find out on May 14, 2019, after providing all the clues to the police and learning that the DNA indeed matched. They obtained a search warrant to enter the Figueroa family's home. Upon arrival, they found Clarissa Figueroa's boyfriend cleaning a carpet with bleach and a hose. He immediately dropped the hose and went inside when he saw the officers. They informed him they had a warrant to search the property in connection to Clarissa Figueroa's alleged involvement in Marlon Ochoa's case. He did not resist and let them in. Inside, they found Clarissa Figueroa and her daughter Desiree. The officers noticed some bloodstains and cleaning supplies, but initially, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. However, their attention was caught by a trash can in the corner of the backyard. Upon lifting the lid, they made a gruesome discovery: a woman's body with a cable around her neck and a cross-shaped wound on her abdomen, showing signs of having been pregnant. After the discovery, the family was informed that something terrible had been found and that they needed to be strong. The identity wasn't confirmed yet, so they couldn't say for sure it was Marlon. Initially, the family hoped she might be alive but in grave condition, as they were not informed about the state of the body. All 3 people inside the house were arrested as primary suspects. The body was taken to the county medical examiner's office, which after 15 hours confirmed that it was indeed Marlon Ochoa, and the cause of death was strangulation. Marlon's father expressed that they had come to this country to give their daughter a good life, and unfortunately, there are bad people everywhere. He also emphasized that Marlon had a bright future ahead and was continuing her education to provide a better life for her children. On May 17th, the primary suspects were brought to court. Clarissa Figueroa, 46, Desiree Figueroa, 24, and Piotr Bobak, 40, all pleaded not guilty to the charges. However, the evidence was overwhelming and a 911 call helped reconstruct the entire crime. The tragedy started when Clarissa Figueroa lost her 20-year-old son in 2017 and couldn't cope with his loss. She then began entertaining the idea of having another child. Towards the end of 2018, Clarissa Figueroa began to fake a pregnancy. She posted ultrasounds and pictures of a future baby room on social media and even showed her family an ultrasound that she had taken from the internet. Her daughter Desiree was surprised by this behavior, especially since her 46-year-old mother could no longer have children due to a tubal ligation years prior. Clarissa even confessed to her daughter that she would become a mother again, even if it meant killing for it. Months later, Desiree also became pregnant, and Clarissa decided it was time to have a baby so they could both raise their children together. Clarissa announced her fake pregnancy and joined a Facebook group for expectant mothers. Before Marlon Ochoa disappeared, she posted on Facebook in a group called Help a Sister Out, saying that she needed a double stroller for her 3-year-old and her unborn child. She was willing to buy, trade, or simply accept a donation as she was unemployed at the time. Clarissa responded to her post, offering new baby clothes and other items. On the night of April 23, 2019, Marlon arrived at Clarissa's house in southwest Chicago. She had just left school and drove there. Once inside and seated on the sofa, Clarissa told her to wait while she and Desiree went to fetch the clothes. As Marlon waited, the women went to the kitchen and initiated their terrible plan. Desiree distracted Marlon with photos of Clarissa's deceased son. Clarissa then used a coaxial cable to strangle Marlon. Despite Marlon's resistance, Clarissa overpowered her and yelled at her daughter for not doing her part correctly. After Marlon stopped breathing, Clarissa went to the kitchen, grabbed a knife, a plastic bag, and a blanket. They proceeded to cut open Marlon's abdomen in a cross shape to extract the baby. They cut the umbilical cord and removed the placenta, but the baby was not breathing. In desperation, Clarissa called 911, falsely claiming she had just given birth at home and that the baby was not breathing. She started performing CPR as instructed until the paramedics arrived. The paramedics arrived, and the baby was taken to a hospital with severe brain damage. Hospital staff found it strange that Clarissa showed no signs of having given birth, but didn't question her at the time. Clarissa continued to pose as the baby's mother, even starting a GoFundMe campaign for donations. They named the baby Sander, although his real name was Giovanni Hadiel Lopez. Tragically, he died on June 14, 2019 due to brain death caused by oxygen and blood deprivation. Clarissa Figueroa and her daughter were charged with Marlon Ochoa's murder, while Clarissa's boyfriend was charged with covering up the crime. The family of Marlon expressed outrage at the hospital for not raising questions sooner and felt discriminated against due to their undocumented status. Marlon and her family were originally from Puebla, Mexico. Marlon was born on November 16, 1999, and had moved to the United States when she was 2 years old with her family's hope of a better life, a dream that ended in tragedy. Well, that is the end of today's case. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Unreal True Crime. If you found this episode informative, please consider subscribing and activating the notification bell so you won't miss future episodes. Thank you for watching and take care.